If you grew up watching the Ten Commandments on TV every Easter, you probably thought it was just tradition. Biblical. Parting seas, plagues, pharaohs, and the works, right? Wrong. This wasn't just a religious epic. It was Hollywood's holy waterboarding of Cold War fear, baptized in glorious Technicolor. We're talking God, freedom, anti-communism, and more American exceptionalism than a Super Bowl halftime show. And Charlton Heston? He's not just Moses. He's Moses with a manifesto. Welcome to Real Talk, where we spill the tea on movies and all the madness in between, with wit, sass, and zero sugarcoating. Let's be clear, Cecil B. DeMille didn't just remake the Ten Commandments because he missed Moses. This was personal, this was political, and yes, this was propaganda with a halo. Sure, he had already directed the Ten Commandments back in 1923, during the silent film era. But by 1956, the world had changed. The Cold War was heating up, McCarthyism was chilling Hollywood, and America wasn't just fighting communism with nukes and NATO, it was fighting it with cinema. And DeMille? Oh, he was the perfect director for this mission. He was raised Protestant, had Jewish roots, and was deeply conservative. But we're not talking Sunday brunch conservative. We're talking founding board member of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, aka Hollywood's We Hate Communism Club. DeMille wasn't the only one using movies as moral weapons. And if you're into wartime Hollywood propaganda, I've got a full review on Casablanca, the iconic World War II film that made resistance sexy and neutrality a sin. Link at the end of this video. To DeMille, the Ten Commandments wasn't just scripture. It was the ultimate anti-communist parable. This 1956 version? It wasn't just about Moses versus Pharaoh. It was Moses versus tyranny. DeMille didn't just believe in God. He believed in God and country. To him, America stood for freedom, because it followed divine law. And communism? That was godless slavery. And this film? This was his burning bush of cinematic propaganda. And you can see it, hear it, in every thunderous voiceover, every plague sequence, every miracle shot drenched in glorious Technicolor. This wasn't just a biblical epic, it was a Cold War sermon in 70mm. In DeMille's mind, Ramesses was a stand-in for totalitarianism. And Moses? A rebel with a moral backbone and a stone tablet agenda. Moses isn't just leading his people out of Egypt, he's leading them out of collectivism. And DeMille even said it himself. The theme of this picture is whether men are to be ruled by God's law, or whether they are to be ruled by the whims of a dictator like Ramesses. I mean, if that's not Cold War energy, I don't know what is. And the casting? Heston wasn't just Moses, he was America's jawline in a tunic. DeMille didn't cast Charlton Heston by accident. He was young, square-jawed, and just conservative enough to make Moses look like he campaigned for Eisenhower between plagues. And get this, when Heston heard DeMille was making the movie, he sent a telegram that read, "I've just seen Moses. He looks like me." DeMille clicked that bait, and let's be real, he wasn't wrong. Heston didn't play Moses as a humble servant of God. He played him like a freedom-fighting prophet with personal beef against tyranny. The line, "God has made man free to choose between good and evil." That's not just scripture, that's capitalist democracy fanfiction. And Heston? He didn't just play the part, he lived it. Years later, he'd go full Moses with a musket as a 5-term president of the NRA, ending speeches by raising a rifle and declaring, "From my cold, dead hands." Yeah, this wasn't just casting. This was conservative myth-making, etched in stone tablets and gun rights slogans. Let's get something straight. The Ten Commandments didn't just throw tablets and part Cs, it flung an entire sermon at the Cold War, and it didn't whisper, it preached. We all remember the iconic sea-parting moment, right? Moses stands tall, staff raised, hair perfectly windblown, orchestra going full drama. But that's not just divine special effects, that's Moses, Cold War edition. The message? If you follow God, he will literally move oceans for you. If you're a tyrant chasing people into the sea, you get drowned by your own hubris. Sound like a little East versus West metaphor? You bet your golden calf it does. And speaking of golden calves, that scene drips with Cold War dread. Moses comes down the mountain, fresh off his divine download, commandments in hand, only to find his people throwing a full-blown idol-worshipping rave. It's basically Burning Man, Sinai edition, gold flashing, bodies dancing, chaos erupting, and a strong whiff of orgy energy in the air. The message? Stray from God's law and you don't get freedom. You get moral blackout. You get anarchy. You get godless communism vibes. Because in DeMille's world, the real sin wasn't worshipping a shiny cow. It was betraying divine order. The subtext doesn't whisper. It screams, don't trust false prophets, and never ever trust a government that doesn't answer to God. Now rewind to earlier in the film. Those brickyard scenes? The Hebrews aren't just slaves. They're a walking metaphor for what happens under totalitarian rule. No God, no choice, just endless quotas and the crack of Pharaoh's whip. DeMille's camera doesn't just linger, it judges. The Egyptians are dressed like every 1950s nightmare of communism, decadent elites built on the backs of crushed souls. You can feel the subtext screaming, this is what life looks like under Stalin, kids. Then Moses gets exiled. He wanders the desert, finds a bush that's on fire but not burning, go with it. And when he comes back, he's not just holy, he's righteous. He's got the aura of a prophet and moral posture of a cold warrior. No groupthink, no state salvation. Just one man, one God, and one mission. Tear down tyranny with tablets like their divine receipts. And that staff duel? Moses versus Pharaoh's priests? Snakes? Everywhere. But it's not just biblical bling. That's truth versus illusion. Faith versus propaganda. And when Moses' snake devours the others, boom. America's godly truth just swallowed your fake news whole, comrade. And then there's the mic drop, the literal last line of the film. Proclaim liberty throughout all the lands, unto all the inhabitants thereof. A direct quote from the Liberty Bell. At this point, DeMille isn't even pretending. This is a hymn to American democracy. If Moses had turned and saluted the flag, nobody would have blinked. Bottom line, every thunderclap, every orchestral swell, every close-up of Charlton Heston's furrowed brow isn't just drama, it's ideological armor. This wasn't just about escaping Egypt. This was about escaping godless tyranny, in sandals with sass, and a stone tablet that screamed, "We the people, but biblical." Now don't let the divinity fool you. Behind the scenes was pure Hollywood madness. Cecil B. DeMille, the 75 years old, literally climbed a ladder to direct like he was delivering a sermon from Sinai, and then had a heart attack on set. Yep. The man collapsed during the Exodus sequence, and like a true prophet, rose from the cinematic dead a few days later to finish the film. Legend. Or just stubborn. Maybe both. That baby in the basket floating down the Nile, Charlton Heston's real-life son, Fraser Clark Heston, and Moses' mother, not Heston's wife, despite the internet myth. She was played by Martha Scott, not Lydia Clark. Let's fact-check, not fanfic, people. Now let's talk production madness. The parting of the Red Sea? Not CGI, obviously. It took 8 months, 360,000 gallons of water, and some of the wildest practical effects Hollywood had ever attempted. DeMille's team filmed torrents of real water in reverse and spliced them with sideways waterfall footage to make those walls move like divine physics. And while you may have heard the myth that it was made from gelatin, it wasn't. Just movie magic so thick, it looked like jelly with a god complex. The effect cost $1 million and made history. That's not just Old Testament drama, that's optical sorcery. Those tablets? Real carved stone. So when Heston held them up like cinematic thunder, those biceps were doing Old Testament reps. No gym, just God. But now, let's get into the real rivalry. Heston versus Brenner. Or should we say, Moses versus Ramesses, on and off screen. Heston gave us Moses the manifesto man, loud, proud, and granite-jawed. But Yul Brynner? That man stole the movie in eyeliner and gold cuffs. Ramesses could have been a cardboard villain. But Brynner gave him layers. Pride, yes. Stubbornness, definitely. But also, moments of doubt. And when he finally mutters, "His God is God," it lands like a Greek tragedy. That wasn't just a line, it was the collapse of delusional grandeur. That's why some say the true arc of the film isn't Moses' triumph. It's Ramesses' unraveling. And oh yes, there was tension. Brenner demanded top billing battles, refused to be upstaged, and even insisted on physically outflexing Heston. There's a whole story that he asked to reshoot a scene because Heston looked taller than him. Ego? Yes. But also, presence. He wasn't there to play sidekick. He came to match Moses' blow for divine blow. And honestly, he nailed it. If Charlton Heston was Moses with a manifesto, then Anne Baxter was Nefertiri with a flair for full-blown camp royalty. She wasn't just dramatic, she was opera level. From the moment she glides into frame, drenched in gold, voice trembling with power, and eyeliner sharp enough to cut through commandments, she's giving Cleopatra meets daytime drama. And then she drops that line. You will be king of Egypt, and I will be your footstool. Ma'am, please. Every gaze is a dagger. Every sob is thunderous. Every jealous outburst is soap opera gold, dipped in eyeliner and served with harp music. She gave dynasty energy and biblical drag, and DeMille ate it up. That was the assignment. He didn't cast Baxter for nuance. He cast her to embody temptation, temptation with volume, and she ate every scene, alive. Fun fact, DeMille almost cast Audrey Hepburn. Yes, Audrey Hepburn. But passed because she was, quote, not curvy enough for the role. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is 1950s casting logic in a pearl-clutching nutshell. Now let's talk production. Because The Ten Commandments wasn't just a movie, it was a logistical miracle wrapped in chaos. First location? California's Imperial Valley and Death Valley. Brutal heat, biblical vibe. Second? Actual Egypt. Real pyramids. Mount Sinai. Abu Simbel. No green screens, just sand, sweat, and a borderline divine level of ambition. Third? Paramount Studios, where they built towering palaces and golden temples that looked expensive because they were. Velvet-draped fantasy, gold-painted everything. None of it real, all of it glorious. This was biblical cosplay with a Hollywood budget. And what a budget. $13 million in 1956, which today, that's over $150 million. The production nearly collapsed under the weight of its own sacred ambition. Thousands of extras, some sources say up to 14,000. A flood of props, location nightmares, and a 2-year schedule that had Paramount sweating like Pharaoh during the frog plague. But it paid off. Big time. The film grossed over $120 million globally, roughly $700 million today. Epic payoff, epic proportions, and yet, only one Oscar for Best Visual Effects. I mean, fair. That parting sea was doing the Lord's work. Look, yes, we'd raise eyebrows today at the casting, the historical liberties, the eyeliner levels alone. Doesn't mean it gets a free pass, but it does explain why it hit like it did in its time. It was a cultural juggernaut. Through today's lens, whole other conversation. The Ten Commandments wasn't just DeMille's religious magnum opus. It was his Cold War sermon in Technicolor. He reframed Moses not as the meek prophet of Scripture, but as the ultimate capitalist rebel, parting seas with one hand, preaching freedom under God with the other. It thundered against tyranny, but made damn sure you knew which side wore the white hat. This wasn't about faith alone. It was about order, obedience, and a divine stamp on American exceptionalism. Forget subtle. This film shouted its ideology, plague by plague, miracle by miracle. Because to DeMille, freedom didn't mean chaos. It meant commandments. And yeah, it still airs every Easter. Not because it's timeless, but because it timed itself perfectly to America's favorite fantasy: God, grit, and the glory of being right.